Nathan Hale was the kind of man who never lost. Not at business, not at golf, not at anything that mattered to him, which for most of his 38 years had been a very short list. He had built Hale Capital from a single office in downtown Chicago into one of the most feared private equity firms in the Midwest. He wore his reputation like a second skin. Precise, relentless, entirely without sentiment. His ex-fiancée once told him, the night she returned his ring, that loving him was like trying to hold water in her hands. He hadn't argued. He had simply called his driver. So when his oldest friend, Derek, made the bet on a rainy Thursday evening at the kind of bar only rich men pretend to like, Nathan didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, swirled the last inch of his bourbon, and smiled the way he always smiled when someone thought they had him cornered. Derek had been working up to it all night. Nathan could tell. There was a specific quality to Derek's silences when he was nervous. Too many pauses, too much laughter at the wrong moments. Finally, around 11, Derek set his glass down with a deliberate click and said, "I have a proposition for you." "You always do," Nathan said. "Stay married for 6 months. I'll wire $2 million to whatever charity you name." Derek paused. "If you back out, you match it from your own pocket." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "That's not a bet. That's a setup, maybe." Derek's mouth curved. "The woman's name is Serena Voss. She works at a nonprofit in Wicker Park. She drives a 2009 Honda. She has never, in her life, been impressed by a man like you." He let that sit for a moment. "I don't think you can handle 6 months with someone who doesn't want anything you have to offer." Nathan looked at him for a long time. Outside, rain moved across the glass in slow diagonals. "Set up the meeting," he said. He had expected someone quiet. Careful. The kind of woman who would be flustered by the restaurant he chose. A place on the 42nd floor where the prix-fixe ran $300 and the wait list ran 6 months. He had chosen it deliberately. He always arranged the terrain in advance. Serena Voss arrived 7 minutes early. She was already seated when he walked in, her coat folded neatly over the back of her chair, a glass of water in front of her. She was looking out at the city the way people look at things they've already decided about. When Nathan sat down, she turned to him without any of the usual performance, no nervous smile, no careful assessment of his suit, no glancing around the room to take in where she was. "Mr. Hale," she said. Her voice was even, not warm, not cold, just steady. "Miss Voss." He extended his hand. She shook it. Her grip was firm and brief, the handshake of someone who had learned early that how you meet a person's hand tells them everything. "I know about the bet," she said. "I know the terms, the amount. And I know Derek has been planning this for about 3 weeks. She took a small sip of water. "I want you to know that I agreed to meet you entirely on my own terms, and those terms have nothing to do with your money." Nathan studied her. He was very good at reading people. It was, in many ways, his most valuable skill, and what he read in Serena Voss unsettled him in a way he didn't immediately have a name for. She wasn't performing composure. She actually had it. "Then what are your terms?" he asked. 6 months, she said. "We conduct ourselves like 2 adults who have agreed to a specific arrangement. You don't try to manage me, impress me, or change me. I keep my job, my apartment, my life. We appear together when the situation requires it. At the end of 6 months, we part without complication." She looked at him directly. "And you never, under any circumstance, mistake this for something it isn't." "And what is it?" Nathan asked. Serena was quiet for just a moment, not hesitating, considering. "It's a transaction," she said. "The same thing everything is for you. I just want to make sure we both know it." He should have felt in control. He had the money, the lawyers, the resources, the experience. He had walked into hundreds of negotiations more complicated than this. Instead, driving home that night, Nathan Hale couldn't stop thinking about the particular way she had said his name. Not like he was powerful. Not like he was dangerous. Like he was simply a fact she was noting and moving on from. He had never been simply a fact before. The wedding was small and contractual. A courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses and no reception. Nathan had offered to arrange something larger. Serena had declined without explanation, which he had begun to realize was characteristic of her. She didn't justify her decisions, she made them. His penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building on Lakeshore Drive. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen that had been featured in an architecture magazine, a wine cellar that a sommelier visited quarterly. He had had it staged before she arrived, though he couldn't have said exactly why. Old instinct, perhaps. Serena walked through it once, slowly, the way you walk through a museum, taking in what interested her, moving past what didn't. She stopped at the window that faced the lake. "It's beautiful," she said. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like an observation about a painting she had no intention of buying. "You'll have the east bedroom," Nathan said. "It has its own bathroom, its own entrance from the hall. I won't come in without asking." She turned and looked at him. For a moment, something crossed her face, brief, unreadable, before it settled back into that particular stillness of hers. "Thank you," she said, and then she went to unpack. In the weeks that followed, Nathan tried everything he knew. He arranged for a personal shopper to leave a selection of clothes in her room. Quietly, without making it a gift, just a convenience. She thanked the shopper by name, returned everything, and left a very polite note about how she preferred to buy her own things. He had a car and driver made available to her. She used it twice, for work trips in bad weather, and then resumed taking the train. He brought home dinner from the restaurant she had mentioned, once, in passing, saying she used to go there for her birthday. She ate with him at the kitchen island, and they talked about a documentary she had watched, and about the neighborhood where she grew up. And Nathan found himself not thinking about the conversation instrumentally, which was unusual for him. She was easy to talk to. Not in the frictionless way of people who agree with everything you say, but in the way of someone who is actually present. She pushed back on things. She noticed inconsistencies. Once, when he made an offhand comment about a neighborhood on the south side, she corrected him with 3 specific facts and didn't soften any of them. He respected that, though he wouldn't have admitted it yet. What he wouldn't admit, even to himself, was that Serena Voss was doing something no one in his professional or personal life had ever managed to do. She was making him aware of the distance between who he presented himself to be and who he actually was. Not by saying so, just by being genuinely, completely unimpressed. One evening he came home late from a deal that had closed badly, a company he'd acquired whose leadership was now threatening litigation, and found Serena at the kitchen table, working. She looked up when he came in, took in whatever was on his face, and said, "There's soup on the stove. I made too much." He stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, still in his coat. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said, and went back to her work. He ate the soup. It was very good. He sat at the far end of the island and didn't say anything, and she didn't fill the silence with noise, and somehow that was the most comfortable he had been in a very long time. It was also the first night he understood that this arrangement was not going to be as simple as he had thought. Around the 3rd month, things shifted, not dramatically, not in the way of movies, where everything changes in a single scene. It was gradual, the way light changes in a room across an afternoon. Nathan began noticing things. The way she held her coffee with both hands in the morning. The specific books she left face down on the arm of the couch. The fact that she always checked her phone at exactly 7:15 and always looked slightly sad afterward and never explained why. He wanted to ask. He didn't. Instead, he started paying attention. Really, paying attention, the way he paid attention in due diligence, cataloging details, building a picture. What she listened to when she thought no one could hear. Peonies, he noticed, from the florist's receipt she'd left on the counter after buying a bunch for the table. She liked peonies. He had some delivered on a Thursday. No card. He left them on the kitchen island and left for work before she was awake. When he came home that evening, they were in a vase on the windowsill, facing the lake. She didn't mention them. But that night at dinner she told him something about her mother, a specific memory, the kind you don't share with strangers. He listened without trying to respond usefully. He just listened. Later, alone, he sat with the understanding that something had changed and that he was not in a position to control it. For the first time in his life, that didn't feel like a problem he needed to solve. It was Derek who named it, of course. Derek always named the things Nathan refused to. They met for lunch on a Wednesday, and Derek watched him across the table with the particular expression he'd worn since they were 22, equal parts affection and amusement, and said, "You're different." "I'm busy," Nathan said. "No, I've seen busy. This is different." Derek cut into his food. "She's gotten to you. She hasn't gotten anywhere." "Nathan." Derek set down his fork. "You canceled the Hartley dinner last week to be home in time for whatever she was doing. You have never canceled a dinner in the 12 years I've known you." Nathan said nothing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, Derek said. I'm saying I've never seen it happen before, that's all. Nathan drove home that afternoon with his hands very deliberate on the wheel. He needed to remember what this was. 6 months. A transaction. He had agreed to those terms as clearly as she had. He walked into the penthouse and found Serena standing in the middle of the living room, very still, which was not like her. She was holding her phone at her side and looking at nothing. "What happened?" he asked. She looked at him, and for the first time since he had met her, the composure wasn't entirely there. Something had moved behind it. "Nothing," she said. "I'm fine, Serena." She breathed in once, slowly. "My mother called. It's complicated." She shook her head. "I'm sorry. It's not your concern." "It doesn't have to be my concern," he said carefully. "I'm just asking." She looked at him for a long moment. Something was being decided in that silence. He could feel it. "My father," she said finally, "died 4 years ago." "I know," Nathan said. Derek mentioned. "He didn't tell you how." Her voice was quiet and very controlled. "Nobody knows how, really. Only my mother and me." She moved to the window. The lake was dark under the evening sky. He had a business, a small manufacturing company, nothing impressive, just 40 employees and 20 years of his life. It was doing fine until a firm came in and acquired the company next to his, then cut the contracts my father's business depended on. Within 8 months, he was in default. She paused. He tried everything. Banks wouldn't lend. Investors weren't interested in the size. He sold things. He borrowed from people he shouldn't have borrowed from. And then one morning he gave up. Nathan stood very still. "He died by suicide," Serena said. "The February I was 26. My mother found him." The word hit Nathan like something physical. He didn't speak. "The firm," Serena continued, her voice flat now, careful, "was Hale Capital." The silence that followed was the longest of Nathan's life. He understood, in that moment, the shape of everything he hadn't seen. Her composure, her refusal to be managed, the way she had said, at their very first dinner, "This is a transaction." Not as an insult, but as a warning. She had known exactly who he was. She had agreed to this arrangement not despite it, but because of it. "Serena," he started. "I'm not finished." Her voice didn't break. "I came into this with a plan. I wanted you to understand for 6 months what it felt like to have no control over something, to be managed and maneuvered and never quite seen." She turned from the window. "I wanted you to feel what my father felt, what my mother felt. What I felt watching everything collapse because your company decided we weren't worth the inconvenience." Nathan couldn't speak. He had closed hundreds of deals. He had signed documents he never read past the financial projections. Somewhere in a folder in a filing cabinet, in the language of acquisition and restructuring and strategic realignment, was the mechanism by which a man's 20 years became a liability, and then nothing, and then a morning in February that could not be undone. "I never knew," he said. His voice came out rough. "I know that doesn't mean anything." "It means something," Serena said. "It means you destroyed lives the way you drove past exits on the highway, without noticing." She crossed her arms, not in anger but in the way of someone holding themselves together. "I'm telling you now because the 6 months are almost up and because—" She stopped. "Because I think you should know who you've been living with, and what you did." He sat down on the couch. He wasn't sure his legs would have held. "Was there anything else?" he asked quietly. "That you haven't told me." She was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. "I was engaged," she said, "when my father died. The stress of that year, the debt, the legal battles, my parents' desperation, I lost the pregnancy. 8 weeks. She pressed her lips together. "My fiancé left 6 months later. He said he couldn't handle everything that came with me." A pause. "So that's the full accounting, if you wanted it." Nathan put his face in his hands. He sat like that for a long time. Serena didn't move. She didn't try to comfort him or punish him more. She just waited with the patience she had always had. The patience, he now understood, of someone who had carried very heavy things for a very long time. When he finally looked up, his face was different. She saw it immediately. "I can't give any of it back," he said. "I know that, your father. The pregnancy, the years." He held her gaze. "But I need you to tell me if there's anything at all, that I can do. Not to fix it. I know it can't be fixed. Just to not be the man who looked away." Serena studied him for a very long time. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I'll tell you if I figure it out." He didn't sleep that night, or the next. He pulled every file his team had on the Voss acquisition, the company they had purchased that had cascaded into the destruction of the businesses around it. He read every document. He found the name. Voss Precision Manufacturing, 41 employees at time of closure. Owner Raymond Voss, 54, of Bridgeport, Chicago. It was 2 lines in a restructuring memo, a footnote in someone's quarterly summary. 2 lines. He sat in his office at 2 in the morning, reading 2 lines that were a man's entire working life, and he thought about Serena at 26. Standing in her parents' house, on a February morning she would never be able to leave entirely. The next day he began making calls. He hired an attorney, not his usual corporate team, but an independent firm, to identify every supplier and small business that had been directly or indirectly harmed by Hale Capital's acquisitions over the past decade. The list, when it came back 3 weeks later, was longer than he expected. He read every name, started visiting. He didn't send representatives. He didn't issue statements or set up a foundation with his name on it. He drove himself to addresses in neighborhoods he had never had reason to visit, knocked on doors, and introduced himself with his full name and said, "I'm here because my company hurt your family, and I want to understand what that meant, and I want to know if there is anything I can do." Some people closed the door. Some people were furious. Some people cried. He accepted all of it. He did not defend himself or explain or offer context. He listened. He came home from those visits quiet and slow in a way that was entirely new. Serena watched him. She didn't ask questions, but she was there when he came in, and she made space in the evenings for whatever he brought back with him. One night she handed him a glass of water and sat down at the other end of the couch and said, "How was it today?" "Hard," he said. "Good, I don't know. Both." She nodded. They sat together for a while without talking, and the silence between them had changed into something that held the weight of everything they now knew about each other without crushing either of them. 3 weeks before the 6 months ended, Nathan came home to find Serena in the kitchen cooking, which she only did when she was processing something. He could read her now, the way you learn to read weather, not perfectly, but well enough. He leaned against the doorframe and watched her for a moment. "I owe you something," he said. She didn't look up from the stove. "You don't owe me anything, Serena." She set down the spoon and turned around. She looked tired in the way she sometimes did after she'd spoken to her mother, and also something else, something that had been building for weeks and that she'd been very careful with. "I know what you're going to say," she said. "I don't think you do," Nathan said, "because I didn't know I was going to say it until about 20 minutes ago." He came into the kitchen. "I'm not going to ask you to stay because I feel guilty. I'm not going to ask you because of the bet or the arrangement or anything we agreed to at the beginning." He stopped a few feet from her. "I'm asking you to stay because somewhere in the last 6 months I stopped being able to imagine the version of my life that doesn't have you in it. And I know that's not your problem to solve. I know I have years of work left to prove that I'm not who I was. But I needed you to know." Serena was very still. "You don't have to answer now," he said. "You don't have to answer ever. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. I just needed you to know it wasn't the bet. It was never the bet." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned back to the stove and stirred something, and he thought that was the answer, and he was already preparing himself for it. "I'm making enough for 2, she said. He stood in the kitchen and let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. They ate dinner at the table by the window. She had put the peonies there again. A new bunch, pale pink this time. The lake was dark and immense beyond the glass, and the city laid its lights across the water. And neither of them said anything for a while because they were both in the unusual position of not knowing what came next and not being afraid of it. The 6 months ended on a Sunday. Serena's mother, a woman named Beverly, came to the city for the weekend. Nathan had asked Serena if she thought that was appropriate, given everything, and Serena had thought about it and said she thought it was time. So Beverly Voss came, and Nathan met her in the living room with the kind of formality he usually reserved for people he owed a great deal and couldn't repay. "I know who you are," Beverly said, when Serena had stepped out of the room for a moment. Her voice was measured. She was a small woman with her daughter's eyes and a stillness that made it clear where Serena had learned it. "I know," Nathan said. "I'm sorry. I know those words aren't sufficient." "They're not," Beverly agreed, "but I'm watching what you're doing. Serena has told me some of it. I'll be watching longer." "I understand," Nathan said. "I'd expect nothing less." Beverly looked at him for a moment with that assessing quiet. Then she said, My husband would have thought this was very strange. A man like you. He'd be right, Nathan said. Something in Beverly's expression changed slightly. Just slightly. He would have come around, she said. Raymond always came around eventually. He believed people could do better. She paused. He was better at that than me. Nathan didn't say anything. He didn't think she needed him to. 2 months after the arrangement officially ended, Serena told him she was pregnant. She stood in the kitchen doorway on an October morning, still in the oversized shirt she slept in, holding the test in one hand with the specific expression of someone who has just absorbed something enormous and is still deciding what to do with the enormity of it. Nathan was at the counter with his coffee. He turned around, and he saw her face, and he put the cup down very carefully. "Serena," he said. "I know," she said. "I know this is. I don't know what this is." He crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and put both his hands on her face and made her look at him. "I know what this is," he said. "This is the best thing that has ever happened to me." His voice was not steady. He didn't try to make it steady. "And I know I haven't earned the right to say that yet. I know there are years of work ahead of me, and I have no idea how to do most of it. But I want to do it. With you, if you'll let me." Serena's eyes were bright. She didn't look away from him. "You're going to have to be very patient," she said. "I know." He pressed his forehead against hers. "I have been reliably informed that I'm a slow learner." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. It was the best sound he had ever heard. They were married again in the spring. A real ceremony this time, small and specific, in the backyard of a house in Bridgeport that had belonged to Raymond Voss and now belonged to Beverly. 12 people, a tent, and tulips from Beverly's garden because Serena said her father had always planted them along the back fence and she wanted them there. Nathan stood at the end of the garden path and watched Serena walk toward him in a dress the color of pale cream, her mother beside her, and understood for the first time in his life what it meant to be exactly where you were supposed to be, not through strategy or positioning or any of the tools he had spent 38 years sharpening. Just here, present, accountable, beginning. Beverly handed her daughter to him with the expression of someone who had not yet fully decided but had decided enough. Nathan received that. The vows, they said, were the ones they had written themselves, and they were honest in the way that only becomes possible after you have been completely seen by someone and have nothing left to hide. He promised to keep doing the work because that was the only promise he could make with any integrity. She promised to be patient with the process because she had found, to her own surprise, that she believed in it. That evening, after the guests were gone, and Beverly was asleep in the guest room, and the tent stood quiet in the darkened yard, Serena and Nathan sat on the back porch steps with their shoes off, and the warm spring air coming in slow from the south. "My father planted the tulips every October," Serena said. "He said the whole trick with them was that you have to put them in the ground before the freeze, when it seems too early, and then you just wait through the whole winter and trust that something is happening underground even when you can't see it." She looked out at the dark garden. He said that was true of most things worth having. Nathan listened to that for a while. "He sounds like someone I would have wanted to know," he said quietly. Serena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Yeah," she said. "He was." The night settled around them, warm and very still, and the city moved at its usual distance beyond the fence, and inside the house a light was on in the guest room, where Beverly Voss was probably reading and probably not sleeping. And somewhere in the not-too-far future there would be a baby who would carry something of Raymond Voss into the world he had not been able to stay in. Nathan Hale sat in the backyard of the house where all of this had started, in the dark with his wife. And for the first time in his life, the stillness felt like enough.